Hello everybody, my name is Emma, and in today's video I'm going to talk to you about how to become a more fluent and more fluid speaker. Before I begin talking about this lesson, I just wanted to thank my friend Eduardo from www.teacheremma.com. Eduardo recommended this video idea, and I think it's a great one, so thank you for this recommendation. So, what do I mean by how to speak more fluidly or fluently? What do I mean by those words? Well, when I'm talking about fluid, I'm talking about the flow of English. English should sound almost like how water flows, language flows. So we're talking about the speed of the language. Am I speaking English too fast? Am I speaking English way too slow? Maybe there's a lot of pauses or moments where I don't say anything. Maybe I don't pause enough. Maybe I don't breathe when I'm speaking. I try to get everything out as quickly as I can. Maybe I use words like ah, way too much. So these all impact the fluidness or the fluency of our language. So I'm going to teach you some tips in order for you to become a more fluid speaker. This will help the people who listen to you speak understand you better and make it easier for them to understand your message. So let's get started with some of my favorite tips. The first tip happens to many learners of English. When they're talking, they're trying to think of a word in English and they can't remember the word. So what do? Well, sometimes they pause and they say, what's that word? And they stop talking and they become so focused on remembering that English word that the listener might get annoyed or bored and the person just tries to think, it's not coming. So this impacts our fluidness as well as our fluency. So what can we do in order to speak more fluid? Well, if you can't think of a word, describe it. So imagine I can't think of the word knife. What would I do? I might say, oh, well, it's the thing you find in the kitchen and you cut vegetables with it. A lot of the times it has a handle and a silver blade. Oh, I know the word knife. So you see what I just did? I talked about what it is used for. I talked about where we might find this object. I said it's in the kitchen. Thinking about these things can really help you to remember the word. Or maybe the listener will know what you're talking about and will be able to tell you the word and guess what it is. So this is one way to help you when you get stuck on a word. Sometimes you might be stuck on a word and this doesn't work. You might just want to move on then. Okay, think about, is this word really that important to this conversation? Can I still get my message across even if I can't remember this word? A lot of the times it's better to just continue talking than to get stuck on the word. My second tip is if you make a mistake in English, it's okay. Native speakers make mistakes all the time. What a lot of students do, or learners of English do, is they get stuck on the mistake. They'll say, for example, they'll be trying to use the present perfect. And they might say, I have got the book. Oh, wait, is it got? Is it gotten? Oh, and then they become very focused on the mistake they made. And then they forget what they're talking about. And the listener sort of stops listening or is not able to follow the conversation that well. So if you want to improve your fluency and your fluidity of English, it's okay to make mistakes. The main thing is, if it's a little mistake that you can fix really quickly, fix it. But if it's something that's going to take some time to fix, or you need time to think about how to fix the mistake, just keep talking. Leave the mistake and move on. This will help the listener understand you better. So if you make a mistake, continue, or if it's a small mistake that you can quickly fix it and continue. My third tip is probably the hardest tip on this list. At least it's hard for me. and that is think before you speak. So a lot of the times our fluency or our fluidity or our flow of the language, we don't have a good flow because we don't know what we want to say. We start talking, and then as we're talking, we realize, oh, I don't know what I'm trying to talk about. I don't know what I'm going to say next. And then we start hesitating. We start saying, we need to backtrack sometimes. We get confused. So sometimes it's a good idea to just take a breath and think about, what do I want to say? What's my main idea? This will help you with your fluency and fluidity. Although I understand it is hard to do this for some people like myself. I also wanted to point out that I used this word before. I've written just a B and a for. This is what we use in text messaging. This means before. The reason I put this is I wanted to tell you that sometimes if you are doing an interview or maybe a presentation and you need to speak fluently, you might want to take some notes on what you're going to say. And so if you're writing notes down, just write the key ideas, and that will help you speak more fluently too. So if I was writing notes, I might use short forms like this instead of writing the full word. So now let's look at some other tips that can help you with the flow of your English and will help you speak more fluently. Okay, so I just mentioned about how it's good to think about what you want to say before you say it. My next tip has to do with this. The next tip I wanted to talk about is the importance of using words like, well, let me think about it. That's a great question. We often use these when we're talking because they give us time to think. The whole purpose of these three, well, let me think about that, or let me think about that for a moment, or that's a great question. It allows us to think before we speak. So I would recommend memorizing some of these expressions and practice using them. They will give you more time to think, and then you'll be able to speak more fluently. Saying something like this is better than just standing there silently. Using these is also better than just jumping into the topic and then realizing, I don't know what I'm going to say, and then really confusing what you're trying to say. So these expressions are really good to use. My fifth tip is it's a great idea to learn common expressions well, like memorize the common expressions. Know them so well that they just automatically come out. By having language come out automatically, you don't have to think so hard about what you're trying to say, and that gives you a chance to think about your message. So which expressions should you try to learn automatically? Well, that's a great question. Oh, look, I just used this one to give myself more time to think. So like I was saying, what are some great expressions? That reminds me is a good expression to use. If you ask me, we use this one when we want to give our opinion. If you ask me, I think blah, 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 blah. Dogs are better than cats, for example. As far as I'm concerned, again, this means in my opinion. By memorizing this expression and getting used to it, it just comes out naturally and it will become a lot easier to speak fluently. Here's another expression, speaking of. So there are many functional expressions in English that we use a lot in conversation. I recommend choosing some of these expressions and learning them well so you can use them when you speak. Okay, my sixth point has to do with pace. What do I mean by pace? Well, I'm talking about the speed of the language. For this point, I think it's really important to know yourself. Do you speak too fast? I've noticed many of my students who speak Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, when they speak English, sometimes they speak faster than native speakers. Or then I might have students from other countries where they speak very slow. So it's a good idea to think about, do you speak too fast or do you speak too slow? or just right. It's also a good idea to know, is your language choppy? What do I mean by that? I'll give you an example of choppy language. I like pizza. Notice that's choppy. It sounds like I'm cutting each word versus I like pizza. That has a nice flow to it. So it's good to know what your language sounds like. Another point with this is also, do you have a lot of music or rhythm in the way you speak? Or does your voice sound very flat? Does it sound like a robot when you talk? It's good to know these things about yourself because once you know this, then you can find ways to fix these issues. And by fixing these issues, you will improve the flow of the language, your fluency, and your fluidity. Okay, and this is another point, pausing. It's also good to know, do you pause too much or too little? Some people, when they speak, they don't breathe enough. So what they do is they take one breath and then they try to talk a lot. And then it's hard because they're not getting enough oxygen, and we need oxygen when we speak. So are you pausing too much or too little? That's another question to ask yourself. If you don't know the answer to these questions, I recommend recording yourself. You can use your phone and listen to how you sound. So now let's look at some other tips on how to sound more fluid. So like everything in life, the way to get better at something is to practice. So if you want to become better at speaking fluently, you need to practice this. So how can you practice? Well, here's my tip for this. I think it's very good when students time themselves speaking. So for example, you can take a topic. Maybe you want to talk about your family or a movie you saw. And once you choose a topic, what you can do is take your phone and time yourself for 30 seconds. For those 30 seconds, you need to keep talking. You can't stop. You have to just keep going and say whatever you can on the topic. Once you're able to do 30 seconds, you can start to try to increase the time you talk for. Maybe the next time you will talk for 45 seconds, and then maybe you can do a minute. So you can start small and work your way up to more time. If you're trying to figure out where you can find topics for, to help you think about things to talk about, you can go to goodluckielts.com. If you click on the speaking tab, they have many different topics that are on the IELTS, but that are also interesting topics just to talk about in general. So I recommend practicing and speaking for periods of time where you try not to stop and you really focus on being fluid in your speech. My 7th tip is related to this. It can also help to practice speaking in front of a mirror. I think that when you actually watch yourself speak, sometimes this can make it easier. It's also important to focus on your body language. Sometimes when we're hunched like this and our head is down, we're more likely to make mistakes and to feel uncomfortable and to not speak as fluidly, versus when we're standing up tall and straight and our shoulders are back and we have a good posture. It's easier to speak fluidly, and part of that is because we're helping our lungs get out more breath, which helps with speech, but it's also standing up tall makes us feel more confident. So that can help you with the flow of your language as well. My next tip is the importance of thinking about, what do you talk about a lot in English or your own language? Once you think about this, you might realize, every day I talk a lot about the weather, or I talk about school, or my family, or my pet dog, or my job, or my plans for the weekend. Once you start really thinking about, what do I talk the most about, you can focus on building your vocabulary in that area. This will give you a very focused goal, and by doing this, it will help the flow of your language because you won't get caught on words, or you won't get stuck trying to think of a word. You'll know the word because you'll have practiced and you'll have thought about what you can talk about the subject. So it will help you with your flow. My final tip is know yourself. What do I mean by this? Well, when I'm talking, I find that I speak best in the morning. So anytime I teach, I try to pick the hardest part of what I need to talk about, and I try to do that first in the morning because I know that's when I am the most fluid. That's when I can speak the clearest and the best. Now, after lunch, I know my English goes down, okay? After lunch, I'm tired. I start making a lot of mistakes with what I'm trying to say. I can't think straight. The time I'm the worst at talking is 3 p.m. I've found this out because I'm always the most tired around 3 p.m. This is the time I really need a nap. So if I need to talk to somebody on the phone fluently, I'm not going to call them at 3 p.m. because I know that's when I'm going to make a lot of mistakes and I'm going to say, a lot. So I might save those calls or those presentations or whatever it is, those speaking tasks for when I know I'm going to be more alert and when it's easier for me to speak. Nervousness or anxiety can also impact or affect the flow of how we speak. When we're really nervous about something, we tend to hesitate a lot more. We tend to say a lot more frequently. So one thing you can do is you can learn how to be less nervous about something. There are different strategies to help you with being nervous. So I have other videos on this topic, and I highly recommend you check them out. But knowing that you get nervous at a certain time, even with an interview, for example, again, practice makes perfect. So that might be a way to help you speak more clearly in those situations. Sleep. It's important to get a good night's sleep. That will also help the flow of your language. When we're well rested, it's easier for us to speak. So thank you so much for watching. You can take our quiz on this topic at www.engvid.com. You can also subscribe to my channel. There you will find a lot of different resources on all sorts of different topics related to English. Don't forget to ring the bell, because if you ring the bell, you will get notifications of what new videos are out. You can also visit my website at www.teacheremma.com. There you'll find some free resources, as well as you can join my club. So thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.